The first time my mother saw my thrift store sweater. She'd peeled a $20 bill from her monogrammed wallet and told me to go buy something that didn't look like regret. Tonight, at Celestine, her eyes did the same thing. Scraping over my simple black knit like it was a personal insult. "Try to look like you belong here, Olivia," she whispered, the words sharp and low under the restaurant's elegant hum. "This restaurant is for successful people." The familiar heat of humiliation crept up my neck. A flush I'd spent a lifetime trying to suppress. As my sister Vanessa watched from across the table, her smile a perfectly polished weapon. "If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share, your support keeps the stories coming. I let my fingers trace the stem of my water glass, focusing on the cold, smooth crystal to ground myself. Celestine was more than a restaurant to me. It was a sanctuary of my own making. The low, ambient lighting was calculated to flatter, the space between tables precisely measured for privacy, the scent of saffron and seared scallops a perfume I'd helped craft. I knew the floor manager had a newborn at home who wasn't sleeping, and that the sommelier, David, was saving for a vineyard in Argentina. These were my people. This was my kingdom, built in silence while my family wasn't looking. "You really could have made an effort," Vanessa chimed in, her voice a syrupy echo of our mother's. She gestured with a manicured hand, the large diamond on her finger catching the light. "That little silver chain you always wear, it's so quaint." She might as well have said worthless. It was the same chain my grandmother had left me, its value measured in memory, not carats. To them, it was just another piece of evidence in their case against my life. I offered a noncommittal nod, the same placid expression I'd perfected over years of family dinners and holiday gatherings. It was my armor. Their version of reality was a closed loop. Vanessa, the high-powered director in pharmaceutical sales, with her sleek German car and her conversations full of mergers and acquisitions, was the embodiment of achievement. I, with my unclear career in consulting, my practical Honda, and my apartment in a neighborhood they never visited, was the perennial underachiever. They never asked what I consulted on, only ever offered to connect me with someone at Vanessa's company for a real position with benefits. David, the sommelier, approached our table. My mother immediately shifted into her finest performance. "We'll require a bottle of the Dom Perignon," she announced, as if issuing a royal decree. "The 2010, I believe. It's a special occasion." Her eyes swept the room, claiming it. David's professional smile didn't waver, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, darted to me for a split second, a silent request for orders from his actual boss. I gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of my head. "An excellent choice, madam," he said, turning his attention fully back to her. "It's a spectacular vintage." Vanessa leaned in, her whisper a stage whisper designed for us and anyone within a 10-foot radius. "Mom, do you know how much that is? It's almost $400. "Well, we are successful people, Vanessa," my mother replied, her voice dripping with condescension as she patted my sister's hand. "We deserve to enjoy the fruits of our labor." The glance she shot me was a quick, pitying thing. I felt the old, familiar ache in my chest, the one that had started when I was 10 and she displayed Vanessa's straight A report card on the fridge while tucking mine away in a drawer. I held the heavy, leather-bound menu, a piece I'd personally sourced from a tannery in Italy. I knew the profit margin on the champagne was 150%. That the truffles shaved over the pasta had been flown in from Alba this morning. And that the head chef, Marco, was likely in the kitchen. A controlled storm of creativity. Finishing the delicate amuse-bouche I'd suggested during our last operations meeting, a foie gras mousse with a dot of blackberry gastrique. When our main courses were ordered, the judgment continued. "The roasted chicken for your entree, Olivia?" My mother's sigh was a masterpiece of disappointment. "At a place like this? You should experience the Wagyu. It's an investment in your culinary education." She made it sound like a moral failing, my choice of a perfectly executed, deceptively simple dish over the ostentatious luxury of marbled steak. "I just like chicken." "Mom," I said, my voice softer than I intended. But it held a thread of steel I hoped she wouldn't notice. The dinner unfolded as a meticulously orchestrated play where I was the stagehand, and they were the stars. They discussed Vanessa's six-figure bonus, the breathtaking sunsets in Bora Bora, the imported marble for her new kitchen island. Each topic was a brick laid in the wall between their success and my perceived failure. I chewed my heirloom tomato salad and said nothing, the taste of victory from a dozen silent business deals turning to ash in my mouth. Then, the world tilted. The double doors to the kitchen swung open with a soft, authoritative thud, and Chef Marco emerged. He was a mountain of a man in his starched whites, his presence instantly commanding the room's attention. He scanned the dining floor, his gaze intense. My mother straightened up, a delighted, proprietary smile spreading across her face. "Look, dear," she whispered to Vanessa, her voice giddy. "The head chef himself. A Michelin-starred chef. I told you this place was in a different league. He must come out to greet his most important guests. Marco's eyes swept past the wealthy socialites and powerful executives, past my preening mother and smirking sister. They landed squarely on me. He changed his course and marched directly toward our table, his stride purposeful. My mother's smile widened, ready to accept the homage, but he walked right past her outstretched hand. He stopped squarely beside my modest chair, his large, warm hand coming to rest on my shoulder. "Olivia," he said, his voice a resonant, joyful baritone that cut through the restaurant's murmur. "I saw your name on the reservation list. We didn't know we were having a board visit tonight." He grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The new seasonal menu is a runaway hit, all because of your notes on the heirloom produce sourcing. The board chair always knows best, doesn't she?" The air was sucked out of the space around our table. My mother's face went slack, all expression wiped clean by pure, unadulterated shock. Vanessa's fork, laden with a piece of that expensive wagyu, frozen mid-air. Her jaw slightly agape, and in the heart of that crushing, beautiful silence, before I could even draw a breath to respond, Marco turned his genial gaze to my utterly shattered family and asked the question that would detonate their entire reality. "So," he boomed, completely oblivious to the nuclear bomb he'd just dropped, "how is everything tasting for the owner of Celestine? Is your mother enjoying her birthday dinner?" The silence that followed was thicker than the truffle shavings on Vanessa's steak. It was a physical thing, pressing in on us, muting the clink of cutlery and the soft jazz from the speakers. Marco, bless him, stood beaming, completely unaware that he had just thrown a grenade into the middle of our family. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish stranded on dry land. The color had drained from her face, leaving her carefully applied makeup looking stark and unnatural. Vanessa's fork finally clattered against her plate, the sound unnaturally loud. She was staring at me, but her eyes were unfocused, as if she was trying to solve a complex equation written on my face. I'm sorry. My mother finally managed, her voice a thin, reedy thing. Marco's smile faltered, finally sensing the tectonic shift he'd caused. His eyes flicked to me, a question dawning in them. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. "It was time. The food is exceptional as always, Marco," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the tension. "Thank you for coming out. Please, don't let us keep you from the kitchen." He took the hint, his professional demeanor snapping back into place. "Of course, Olivia. Enjoy your evening, everyone." He gave a short, polite bow and retreated, leaving the three of us in the wreckage. The moment he was gone, all eyes were on me. The pity was gone. The condescension was gone. It was replaced by a raw, bewildered shock. "Owner?" Vanessa whispered the word as if it were in a foreign language. "Olivia, what is he talking about?" My mother found her voice, and with it, a sliver of her old authority. "This is some kind of mistake. A joke in very poor taste." She looked around, as if expecting a hidden camera crew to emerge. You can't afford a place like this." I took a slow sip of water, placing the glass down with deliberate care. The ember of humiliation that had burned in my chest for years was now a cool, steady flame of resolve. "I can," I said simply. "And I do. I purchased Celestine 18 months ago for $14.2 million. The number hung in the air, a tangible, monstrous thing. Vanessa actually flinched. My mother's hand flew to her chest. "That's impossible," she breathed. "It's one of 43 restaurants in my portfolio," I continued, my tone even, as if I were discussing the weather. "My annual income from them is just over $9 million. The consulting I do? It's for my own companies. I'm the board chair for the entire group." I watched as the pieces clicked into place in their minds, the old car, the simple clothes, the quirky apartment. It wasn't a lack of success. It was a choice. A choice they had never, ever considered because their definition of success was so narrow, so loud, so dependent on external validation. "But your car," Vanessa stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me as if my 10-year-old Honda was the ultimate proof of my fraud. "It's reliable, it's paid off, and it gets me from point A to point B," I said. "I don't need a BMW to feel successful." I looked directly at my mother. "And I don't need a $400 bottle of champagne to feel like I belong somewhere. I belong here because I built it." The truth was a guillotine, and it had finally dropped. All their snide comments, their unsolicited advice, their years of treating my life as a cautionary tale, it all collapsed under the weight of a single, undeniable fact: I was the most successful person at the table. And I had been all along. My mother's eyes welled with tears. But they weren't tears of joy or pride. They were tears of sheer, unadulterated shame. Her face crumpled. "All this time," she whispered, her voice breaking. "All this time, we thought. Olivia, why didn't you tell us?" And that was the real question, wasn't it? The one that had been simmering beneath the surface of every family gathering, every holiday, every phone call. I looked at her. At the genuine confusion mixed with her mortification, and I knew I had to answer. I had to give them the truth they'd never been willing to hear because you never asked, Mom, I said, my voice soft but unwavering. You never once looked at my life and saw anything but what you wanted to see, a project. If I'd told you, you would have found a way to dismiss it. To say I was lucky, or that it was a fluke, or that it wasn't a real job. Your approval was a game I realized I could never win, so I stopped playing. I saw the words land, each one a hammer blow. Vanessa was staring down at her plate, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The wagyu was probably cold now, its luxury meaningless. My mother opened her mouth to speak, to protest, but no sound came out. The battle was over, and they had lost without ever knowing they were in a war. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of strained silence. The famous Celestine dessert cart was wheeled over, but no one had the appetite for it. The champagne, now flat and warm in the glass, tasted like regret. We asked for the check. David, the sommelier, brought it over on a silver platter and presented it directly to me with a respectful nod. My mother couldn't even look at him. I reached for my simple, worn leather wallet, another source of their past amusement. But as my fingers brushed against the soft grain, I saw my mother's hand tremble as she reached for her own pristine, monogrammed clutch. And I knew the final, most shocking revelation was yet to come. End of section 2. I am ready to write section 3 when you give the command. Next Liku, of course. Here is the final section of the story. My hand was on my wallet, the simple, worn leather, a familiar comfort. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the ultimate symbol of the person they thought I was. I saw my mother flinch, her own perfectly manicured hand hovering over her designer clutch. The unspoken question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating: who would pay for this devastating meal? No, my mother whispered, her voice raw. The single word was filled with a lifetime of misunderstanding. Olivia, please. Let me. It's my birthday. It was a plea, a last, desperate attempt to cling to the crumbling ledge of her authority, to perform the one role she had left, the provider. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tears she was bravely holding back, the profound shame in her eyes, the way her carefully constructed world had been reduced to rubble around her. The anger I had carried for so long, a cold, hard stone in my gut, began to soften, to dissolve into something else. Something like pity, and maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of forgiveness. Okay, Mom, I said softly, pulling my hand back. Thank you. The relief that washed over her face was heartbreaking. She paid the bill with a platinum card, her hand trembling so violently she could barely sign the receipt. The walk out of the restaurant was the longest of my life. The hostess, another employee I knew by name, smiled warmly at me. Good night, Ms. Reed. See you next week for the financial review? Good night, Sarah. Yes, 10 o'clock, I replied. The normalcy of the exchange a stark contrast to the earthquake behind me. We stood on the polished sidewalk outside Celestine, the cool night air doing little to clear the tension. My mother turned to me, her composure finally breaking. Olivia, I don't even know what to say. We have been so blind. So cruel. Vanessa stood beside her, silent for the first time all night. She wasn't looking at her phone or checking her reflection. She was just staring at the ground, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. It wasn't about the money, I said, the truth of the words settling deep within me. My hand was on my wallet, the simple, worn leather, a familiar comfort. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the ultimate symbol of the person they thought I was. I saw my mother flinch, her own perfectly manicured hand hovering over her designer clutch. The unspoken question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating: who would pay for this devastating meal? No, my mother whispered, her voice raw. The single word was filled with a lifetime of misunderstanding. Olivia, please. Let me. It's my birthday. It was a plea, a last, desperate attempt to cling to the crumbling ledge of her authority, to perform the one role she had left, the provider. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tears she was bravely holding back, the profound shame in her eyes, the way her carefully constructed world had been reduced to rubble around her. The anger I had carried for so long, a cold, hard stone in my gut, began to soften, to dissolve into something else. Something like pity, and maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of forgiveness. Okay, Mom, I said softly, pulling my hand back. Thank you. The relief that washed over her face was heartbreaking. She paid the bill with a platinum card, her hand trembling so violently she could barely sign the receipt. The walk out of the restaurant was the longest of my life. The hostess, another employee I knew by name, smiled warmly at me. Good night, Ms. Reed. See you next week for the financial review? Good night, Sarah. Yes, 10 o'clock, I replied. The normalcy of the exchange a stark contrast to the earthquake behind me. We stood on the polished sidewalk outside Celestine, the cool night air doing little to clear the tension. My mother turned to me, her composure finally breaking. Olivia, I don't even know what to say. We have been so blind. So cruel. Vanessa stood beside her, silent for the first time all night. She wasn't looking at her phone or checking her reflection. She was just staring at the ground, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. It wasn't about the money, I said, the truth of the words settling deep within me. It was about you seeing me. Just me. My mother nodded, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path through her powder. We see you now. The following months were a quiet, awkward dance. The constant stream of condescending advice stopped. The helpful job lead ceased. There were no more comments about my car or my clothes. Instead, there was a new, cautious silence, a space filled with unspoken apologies and a hesitant respect. Vanessa started calling me. Not to brag, but to ask questions. Real questions. About business, about profit and loss, about what it felt like to build something from the ground up. The polished, corporate sheen she always wore began to crack, revealing a woman who was deeply, profoundly unfulfilled. 6 months after the dinner at Celestine, she asked to meet me for coffee. She arrived without makeup, dressed in a simple sweater that looked suspiciously like one of mine. I put in my notice, she said, stirring her latte without looking at me. The bonus structure this quarter was a record, and I didn't care. I thought of you, sitting in that restaurant, so sure of yourself while we were making fools of ourselves. You have something I don't, Olivia. Something real. I listened, my heart thudding strangely in my chest. I know I have no right to ask this, she continued, her voice barely a whisper. But is there any place for me in your world? I'll start at the bottom. I'll do anything. I just need to learn how to do something that matters. I saw the raw vulnerability in her eyes, the same little sister who used to follow me around until our parents taught her to look down on me. The last of my resentment melted away. I hired her as an operations assistant for a new bistro I was opening, a role that came with a 60% pay cut. She accepted without hesitation. A year to the day after the dinner that changed everything, we found ourselves back at Celestine for our mother's birthday. The memory hung in the air, but it was no longer a source of pain. It was a reference point, a before and after. We were seated at a different table, the atmosphere lighter, easier. My mother, looking older and somehow wiser, smiled at me, a genuine, unforced smile. Vanessa chatted animatedly about supply chain logistics for the bistro. Her eyes alive with a passion I'd never seen in her before. When the server came for our order, my mother and sister both chose the Wagyu. Then the server looked at me. And for you, ma'am? He asked. I didn't even need to look at the menu. I'll have the roasted chicken, please. A soft, understanding smile touched my mother's lips. There was no sigh, no judgmental glance. She finally understood. It wasn't about the price. It wasn't a symbol of my limitations. It was simply what I wanted. It was my choice. As the plates arrived, I looked around the beautiful room. At the staff who greeted me with respectful nods, at my sister who was finding her own path. And at my mother who was finally seeing her daughter for who she was. The victory wasn't in the shock on their faces that night a year ago. It wasn't in the money or the power. It was in this moment. In the quiet confidence of ordering a simple meal in my own restaurant, surrounded by my family, who were finally, truly, seeing me. I had spent so long building a fortress of success to protect myself, only to discover that real success wasn't a fortress at all. It was this. This peace. This authenticity. This quiet, unshakable knowledge that I was living completely, and utterly, on my own terms.